Hi, my name's Ember Lynn. They didn't just leave my name off the memorial program, they erased me from my own mother's legacy, then forged my signature to claim everything I created. My older sister stood at the podium, beaming, calling herself Mom's only true heir, while I sat in silence, listening to my eulogy spoken in her voice beneath her name. What they didn't know is I never stopped paying attention, and what I uncovered? It didn't explode, it rippled. Have you ever watched your own family cheer for the person who stole your life? Before we get into it, what's the deepest betrayal your family's ever made you live with? Let me know below, because this story doesn't end how they expected. I parked 2 blocks from the Crystal View Memorial Hall, not because I had to, but because I needed time to breathe. The skies over Asheville, North Carolina were gray, heavy with late winter gloom. No cherry blossoms yet, no color, just quiet tension in the air. When I reached the glass entrance, I saw their names printed neatly on the welcome board. Dr. Celeste Lynn, Celebrating a Legacy, hosted by Callista Lynn and family. No mention of me. Inside, the warmth of the lighting clashed with the ice in people's eyes. One woman gave me a blank, polite smile, the kind you offer an old coworker whose name you never learned. Then, a young man with a guest list approached. "Need help finding your seat?" he asked. "I'm with the family," I said. He scanned the list, hesitated. "I'm sorry, you're not. Just point me to an open seat." He did. A side aisle, close enough to see everything, far enough to be invisible. A silver reserved sign was quietly removed beside me. Someone else sat down. I didn't need a name tag to know where I stood. That chair said everything. I wasn't family. I was a forgotten footnote. The service began with soft piano and a slideshow projected across the tall sanctuary walls. Photos of my mother accepting awards, cutting ribbons, shaking hands with university presidents and biotech CEOs. Not one of us laughing over takeout in her lab office. Not a single shot of her helping me debug my first prototype at midnight, coffee in hand. Only the polished legacy. Then Callista stepped onto the stage. She wore a jet black dress, sharply cut and tailored like it was made of steel. Her voice didn't shake. My mother believed in progress, innovation, and purpose, and today, as the CEO of Lynn Tech, I promise her vision will thrive. Not once did she mention me. She thanked the board, our investors, the scientists who made Mom's dreams come true. She called Lynn Tech their joint triumph. The room applauded like they were watching a keynote. I stayed silent, hands laced tightly. An older gentleman from Mom's early clinical trial days glanced over. Recognition flickered. Then he looked away. After the final hymn, I moved quietly toward the side hallway. A few guests offered brief nods, courtesy, not connection. I found a quiet alcove and checked my phone. 5 emails. One stood out, forwarded to my old Lynn Tech address, still linked to my personal inbox. The subject line read, "Champagne tonight. She finally has it all. No more loose ends. Mom's gone and ease out. Clean slate. Pop the champagne." It was from Callista's executive aide, a girl I trained myself 3 years ago. I didn't flinch, just forwarded it to myself with the subject, "Keep." I didn't storm out, didn't scream. I just stood beside a 6-foot portrait of my mother, captioned with, "Success is built on sacrifice, loyalty is everything." None of it felt like her, just curated lines on rented canvas. A child ran past, chasing a balloon. The string broke. It floated upward, untethered, free. For a second, I envied it. Then I whispered to myself, they didn't just bury her today. They buried me, too. The inheritance meeting came 5 days later. Lynn Tech's Asheville campus. I arrived early, using the loading dock stairs instead of the glass elevator. The silence hit like concrete. Everyone had already chosen their side. And it wasn't mine. The conference room looked the same, high polish walnut, carafes of water, corporate perfection. A looped video of Mom's highlights played in the corner. I was guided to the farthest seat. No folder, no nameplate. Cassian Wolf, our legal counsel, cleared his throat. As filed in the revised will dated 6 months prior to Dr. Celeste Lynn's passing, the following allocations are confirmed. 6 months. Ally primary assets, equity, and voting control of Lynn Tech shall transfer to Callista Lynn, along with all patents and branding rights. Callista leaned back, composed. She nodded like this was destiny fulfilled. Cassian continued. Aber Lynn shall receive a framed portrait of her mother, a handwritten letter, and a one-time honorarium of $50,000 0 cents. No gasps, no outrage, just polite nods. Some board members applauded. Callista stood and smiled at them, offering quiet thanks. Mom would have wanted this. Let's honor her legacy. With clarity, I didn't move. Not until the room cleared. Cassian lingered. Ember, he said softly, can we talk? He led me to a private office and pulled out a folder. I want you to see this, he said, sliding it across the table. I knew that document. I'd seen it before. My signature was at the bottom. But something wasn't right. Dated 3 years ago. I scanned the top. Limited power transfer for internal reallocation. Lynn Tech Holdings, LLC. I remember this, I said quietly. Callista said it was just to handle some legal formalities during the Bloom Tech acquisition. Temporary. Cassian nodded, jaw clenched. It should have been. But the document wasn't time-limited, and last quarter it was amended. An addendum was added, making it permanent. Al and I looked up slowly. Who filed that? He hesitated. Filed through her team's legal channel. It's technically valid, but morally... His voice trailed off. So she didn't just take it. She used my trust, my hand, my signature. I leaned back in the chair. It felt like the air had been pulled from the room, like my lungs were trying to drink from an empty glass. Outside, sunlight had finally pierced the clouds, slicing golden angles across the floor. I stepped into the hallway, still clutching the document. On the receptionist's counter lay a silver frame. My mother and me, on a wind-swept cliff, arms around each other. My smile was real in that photo, my eyes still open. I carried it to my car, laid it face down in the back seat. Inside, I took a screenshot of the POA amendment and created a folder titled, Truth, Not Tears. It wasn't just a label, it was a vow. No more parking lot panic attacks. No more letting Callista script me out of my own story. No more quiet exits. A memory surged. Tea on the back porch 3 years ago. Callista, smiling softly as she passed the papers. Just sign here, she'd said. You trust me, right? And I had. That would never happen again. The silence after betrayal has a sound. A low hum, steady and sharp. It clung to me like static as I sat beside my mother in the back of a town car, being driven to a gala honoring a company I helped build. 2 weeks had passed since the will was read, since the truth had been used like a knife I didn't see coming. Now I was attending a tribute to a legacy I'd poured myself into while being erased from it. The event was in San Francisco's Marina District. Modern, glass-fronted, glamorous. The kind of place that whispered well through clean lines and curated lighting. My invitation hadn't come from Lynn Tech. It had come from an old colleague, one of the few who still remembered decency. You should be there, she'd written. Inside, the lobby glittered with nostalgia. Enlarged photos of milestones lined the entryway. Construction, press conferences, lab breakthroughs. A towering glass sculpture spiraled upward in the center, legacy through innovation. A looped digital display scrolled the names of founders, visionaries, key contributors. Mine wasn't there. On every seat, a folded program. On the back cover, Callista's professional portrait and bio. The tribute film would start at 7:10 sharp, followed by her keynote. I sat near the back, beside a junior assistant who kept glancing at her smartwatch. My mother sat quietly, her hands folded. She hadn't said much since the inheritance was announced, but her silence wasn't from confusion. It was practiced. 7:10. The lights dimmed. The film opened with footage of my mother in her early research years. White coat, goggles, beaming. Calista joined in every milestone photo, every groundbreaking, every handshaking moment. She narrated the video herself with a voice polished for PR. I recognized the rhythm. It was my writing. Altered, stripped, but mine. Then came a scene from our 2018 pitch at the Global Tech Summit. The video had been cropped. I had stood beside her that day, delivering half the speech, but here, Calista stood alone. My body, my voice, vanished. A woman beside me leaned in. "Weren't you in that pitch too?" "I wrote that speech," I said flatly. She blinked. "Huh." That was it. When the video ended, Calista took the stage, glowing under the spotlights. "I thank everyone who built this dream with me," she said, "especially those who stepped aside so others could lead." The line landed with a polite ripple of applause. I didn't look around, I knew what she meant. I hadn't stepped aside. I had been edited out. I rose, my mother followed. Outside, beneath a velvet sky and steel dust breeze, she lit a cigarette, something I hadn't seen her do in years. She took a drag, exhaled slowly, then said, "You know, maybe it's just how things are now," my mother said quietly. "You chose your path." I turned to her. The glow from the streetlight carved shadows across her face. "I didn't walk away," I said. "I was pushed, quietly, and they applauded while it happened." She didn't argue, just took another drag and stared ahead like the skyline held an answer neither of us could say out loud. We stood there for a moment longer, then I stepped off the curb and called a rideshare. As the car pulled up, I glanced back at the building. Through the glass, I saw Calista posing with a plaque, "Built on honor, powered by truth." A line I had once written, now engraved beneath her name. I felt nothing. Not anger, not pain, just distance. After the gala, I vanished for a few days. No emails, no posts, no responding to people who used to fight for a seat beside me, now pretending I was never there. But silence never lasts. That Tuesday, a courier dropped a thick cream envelope at my doorstep, embossed in gold. It read, "You're invited to the Lintic Legacy Roundtable, celebrating vision, honoring unity. Signed by Bexley Torres, Chief Marketing Officer." I'd never met her, but I already knew who she served. The meeting was Thursday at 11 a.m., back at Lintec's original Asheville campus, the same building where I had pulled all-nighters building our first neural framework. I used to own that space. Now, I wasn't sure I'd even be offered coffee. I arrived early. Bexley greeted me with a photo-op smile. "Ember, so glad you could join us." She gestured to a long glass table with glossy folders and lemon water pitchers. "Your energy is vital to this conversation." 6 people were already seated, strangers, all younger. Then Calista walked in. White blazer, pearl earrings. She dressed in purity like it was armor. She smiled like I'd done her a favor by showing up. "We were aligning our next quarter around family, legacy, and tech evolution," Bethley began, clicking through slides. The first read, "The Lin Legacy, Sisters in Vision." I stayed silent through the mock-ups, Calista and me on rooftops, coordinating outfits, a campaign built on fiction. A press release sat in front of me. Ember Lin, founding consultant. No equity, no decision power, just an honorary nameplate. "You want me to pose with a story that no longer belongs to me?" I asked. Bexley blinked. "We think your legacy deserves to be seen." Calista leaned forward. "This makes you visible. It honors the bridge you were." "The bridge people walk over," I said, closing the folder. A pause followed. Then Bexley, regaining composure. "Participation is voluntary, of course, but we do believe this is healing. For the public. For you. Healing, that's what they say when they want you silent and smiling." I stood before the group photo could be taken. I didn't go home, went to Cassian's office. The lights were dim. He looked up slowly, older than I remembered. I need the truth, I said. Was I ever in the revised will? He sighed, opened a locked drawer, and handed me a thin, unmarked file. Inside, a draft will, my name clearly listed, equal beneficiary. But it wasn't filed, he said. Callista submitted another version 2 days before your mother was hospitalized. And she had the authority? She claimed power of attorney. The notary was private. I only saw the filed version afterward. It wasn't grief, it was strategy. They didn't just cut me out. They tried to erase me. But I still had this draft. And I still knew every folder she forgot to delete. Every early design, every framework. I still had them all. They forgot what I taught Callista when she was fresh out of college and terrified of investor questions. And they forgot that I don't break loud. I break wide. I opened my phone, hit record, and whispered, I used to think dignity meant walking away, but maybe it means standing long enough for them to lie while looking you in the eyes. Then I saved the file, named it, Not a Ghost. The cottage was silent. Even the wind outside seemed to hesitate, like it didn't want to interrupt whatever was unraveling inside me. I hadn't really slept, just drifted in and out of old meetings, arguments, moments of clarity I hadn't seen clearly at the time. So when my phone buzzed at 3:47 a.m., I was already half awake. No subject, no sender, just an attachment titled mom_final_draft_V3 PS. Suspicion was my first instinct. A scam? A setup? But I opened it anyway. The file loaded slowly, casting a faint blue light over my blanket. It wasn't a prank. It had been scanned hastily, tilted, imperfect. My mother's handwriting filled the margins in blue ink. One line near the bottom was circled. Ember will carry this forward the right way. I stopped breathing for a moment. The document clearly divided Lintech's shares between me and Callista. It referenced the charitable trust I'd encouraged her to create, dated exactly 30 days before her hospitalization. She'd changed her will? She hadn't forgotten me. Someone else had made sure her wishes never saw daylight. I didn't cry. I just sat with the glow of the screen pulsing on my skin like it was alive. By 6:00 a.m., I was out of bed, digging through old storage bins in the hallway closet. Some still smelled faintly of stale printer paper and hotel coffee, remnants of pitch nights and beta builds. In a folder labeled Founding Docs Internal Use, I found another will draft, older but similar. Her signature. My name. A mirrored clause. Not court-proof, but a thread. And I was ready to pull it. By 7:30, I was at the kitchen table in an oversized sweater, mismatched socks, staring at the note I'd written before bed. This isn't revenge, this is realignment. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't touched in years. Marcellus James, Lintech's former logistics director, before Callista reshuffled the leadership. Quiet, brilliant, unshakable. The kind of man who knew exactly how many processors we had running without needing a report. He answered on the second ring, Ember. His voice still had that soft Arizona rhythm, like every word mattered. I need your eyes on something, I said. I think my mother tried to fix things, but it got buried. He paused. Send the file. I'll match it to the internal archives. Thank you, I whispered. He never stopped seeing what was happening, he said, but I wasn't in a position to stop it. No one was, I replied, but maybe now we are. I forwarded the PDF. No message, just like I received it. Then I opened my notes app and typed 2 words, next move. The silence stretched through the afternoon. I tried replying to the anonymous sender. Who are you? It bounced back. So instead of chasing ghosts, I grounded myself the only way I knew. Memory. One kept resurfacing. 6 months before she died, my mother and I were at a cafe near Biltmore Village. She sipped her black coffee, 2 sugars, watching the pigeons like she was reading a market trend. "Your sister has fire," she'd said, eyes still on the sidewalk. I braced myself. "But you have calm. That's why you'll outlast the noise." It didn't feel like goodbye then. But now I hear it differently. She wasn't blind. She saw Callista's ambition, and she saw my patience. She just didn't realize Callista would weaponize it. That night, I opened a fresh page in my yellow notepad. At the top, what she saw slash what they buried. First bullet. Her trust wasn't loud, but it was real. And now, I wasn't chasing revenge. I was restoring truth. If no one else had the courage to pull the curtain back, I would. Because they didn't just bury the will. They buried the version of me that still had a voice. Not anymore. The air inside the old Lintech Records facility smelled of damp concrete and fading toner. My boots echoed softly as I followed Marcellus through a narrow aisle lined with rusting shelves, past boxes no one had touched in years. He hadn't said much since picking me up that morning, only that this place was off the grid, a forgotten storage unit once used before the company's rebrand, locked behind a keypad only he still remembered. He stopped at a dented cabinet. This one. We pried it open together. The folder he handed me was thick, heavy, alive with quiet truth. "I kept these," he said, "because one day someone was going to want the version not sold to investors." Inside, our early strategy documents. My handwriting next to his. Project brief signed by me and my mother. A flyer from our first pitch night. My name listed first. I held a photo of the 3 of us. Mom, Callista, and me. All smiles. The caption read, "The minds behind Lintech." Dated 4 years before I was erased. "I was never gone," I whispered, "just overridden." Marcellus didn't speak. His silence said enough. An hour later, the door creaked open again. A young man entered, hoodie pulled tight, glasses fogged. He looked barely 27. "You're Ember?" he asked. "It's strange meeting you. You're not in the system anymore." "That's the problem," I said. He powered up his laptop and opened a mirrored drive. I was on the transition team during the rebrand. I wasn't supposed to keep access, but I saved some logs. He opened a folder labeled legacy_override_backup. Line after line of metadata and internal edits filled the screen. Under project lead, my name had been replaced. Under founder references, blank fields. Under keynote author, Callista's name was stamped over a file from the week I was hospitalized. "They didn't delete you," he murmured. "They rerouted everything, made it look like you were..." Background. I stared at the altered record of a speech I'd delivered to the board. The date matched my hospital stay. Marcellus rested his hand on the table. "This isn't just pain anymore. This is structure. It's intent. And intent is everything," I said, "especially in court." Lyndon cleared his throat. "There's more. Email threads between the comms team and the branding agency. They use this phrase, 'Remove all non-strategic founders from public narrative.'" I was the only one that applied to. "Send it to me," I said. "All of it." He handed me a flash drive. "Already on here. I don't know what you'll do with it, but people should know." We left as the sun dipped behind the hills of Asheville. Shadows stretched across the alley. Back home, I laid everything out on the dining table. Flash drives, printed memos, legal pads, my history in fragments. Then I hit record. The phone camera pointed straight at me. No makeup, no filters, just truth. "To the board," I said. And to anyone wondering why I disappeared, I didn't. I was moved. Silently. Strategically. With polish. I flipped through the evidence. Dates, notes, video clips, side-by-sides. No yelling, no threats. I let the paper speak louder than I ever could. Then I emailed Cash and Wolf. Subject, preliminary briefing attached. Body, let's not move in anger, let's move in clarity. In my notepad, I wrote, "They took my name off the wall, Now I'll carve it into the foundation. By the time I stepped into the San Mateo boardroom, every conversation died mid-sentence. Heads turned. I didn't need to raise my voice. My presence did all the cutting. I hadn't stepped into that room in over 4 years. The receptionist barely looked up until she scanned her tablet and paused. Her fingers froze mid-scroll. My name wasn't listed. Not on the agenda. Not on the welcome slide looping in the background, not even in the guest registry where I'd once been the keynote speaker. I expected that, and carried nothing but my phone and a single sealed envelope in my left hand. No laptop, no personal assistant, no polished binder. Not just me and the truth they'd spent years pretending didn't exist. There was one empty chair, near the side of the glass conference table. Not next to Calista, not near the front, but it was there. I glanced at it, then remained standing. That chair would stay empty, not because I didn't belong, but because I refused to sit where they'd decided I should. Calista, stationed at the head of the table in a crisp ivory blazer, cleared her throat. "Thank you all for joining today's quarterly brand review," she began. "I want to start by recentering our mission, legacy through innovation, and the values our mother instilled in this company. Not our mother, not her legacy alone." Her voice smoothed over the past like lacquer. Slides, projections, graphs, polished sound bites. Then, just as she launched into the second bullet, I stepped forward. Didn't interrupt, didn't speak. I simply slid the sealed envelope across the glossy table toward Lintech's general counsel. The wax seal cracked against the surface as it stopped in front of him. "I believe this belongs here," I said, "since we're discussing legacy." Calista faltered. Inside that envelope, the original, will signed and dated, my name beside hers. My mother's handwritten note, "Ember will carry this forward the right way." Also inside, metadata records proving tampering, letters from Marcellus verifying my project authorship, a sworn statement from Linden, the systems contractor, detailing how my contributions were scrubbed from the archives, and one final email from my mother to legal counsel, time-stamped 12 days before her hospitalization. "I've asked Calista to pause edits until I return from my appointment. Ember and I have one more conversation to finish. I owe her that." The moment the wax seal cracked, Calista stiffened like someone had dropped a lit match in her lap. "I'm not here to reclaim what's been stolen," I said quietly. "I'm here to correct what's been rewritten." Behind her, the screen lit up. The IT technician, once ordered to erase me, had queued a file I had scheduled. No speech, no pitch, just proof. Footage of the company's first pitch night, my voice narrating, slides I built, investor meetings, my mother shaking my hand after we closed our first round of funding. In the photo, the three of us, me, Calista, and Mom, smiling, equal. The voiceover said, "You erased a daughter, but you can't erase a foundation." Silence fell like fog. No coughing, no paper rustling. One board member leaned forward and asked, "Is this true?" Calista didn't answer. Her jaw locked tight, eyes fixed on me. But her white-knuckled grip on the table edge spoke for her. "I won't speak again today," I said, "but I expect you to review everything I've submitted. Quietly, thoroughly, honestly. No drama, no escalation." I turned and left the room, leaving behind a stillness thick as velvet. Outside, wind struck my face like a question, but I wasn't cold. The hearing was held in one of Lintech's arbitration rooms, glass-walled, soundproof, designed for conflict to feel sanitized. Leather chairs in a perfect circle. Fake neutrality. I arrived early. Board members in navy and gray shuffled papers. Calista sat already, head tilted, speaking quietly to her attorney. She didn't look at me. She didn't need to. This wasn't surprise. It was choreography. I took my seat in silence, hands folded in my lap, then waited ready for what curtain rose next. Calista opened first. Her voice, cool and polished, filled the arbitration room like chilled glass. "I understand," there's been confusion regarding past agreements and historical roles. In the spirit of unity, Callista said smoothly, I've brought a signed release dated 3 years ago in which Ember waived all future claims to company equity or executive control. She slid the document across the table like it was a peace offering. The board murmured. One member leaned forward to read it. Another reached for their glasses. And for a moment, it felt like Callista had done it again. Spun the facts into just enough doubt to cast me out. I let the silence settle, let them absorb her words like truth. Then I asked, where's the original? The room paused. Cassian Wolf cleared his throat and calmly opened his leather briefcase. He removed a folder, aged at the edges and folded once down the middle. This, he said, laying it beside the copy, is the original agreement. He glanced at the room, then at Callista. It contains a reversal clause inserted by Ember and her mother during initial drafting. If tampering of any foundational company asset is proven at any time, he paused, the agreement becomes void, immediate, irrevocable. The room shifted. Chairs creaked as postures stiffened. Callista's attorney whispered, but Cassian didn't stop. The clause is now active. Callista's eyes flickered, a fracture in her composure. Not panic, recognition. You never activated the clause, she said evenly, because there was no tampering. Never again do I ever hit I use Ray, graduation logs, I looked, and LinkedIn. Until you deleted my authorship logs, redirected IP citations, and removed my name from every historical milestone. Cassian didn't look at her when he said it. He looked at the board. The breach has been documented. Callista's silence spoke louder than any defense. She didn't argue. She understood. The hearing ended without drama. No shouting, no defense theatrics, just stillness. By the time I reached the press lounge 2 floors down, the company's official statement had already been released. Callista Lynn has stepped down from her role as CEO to pursue independent ventures. The line was sterile, polished, no mention of internal investigations, just a clean erasure, the kind they once tried to use on me. But the public wasn't fooled. Within an hour, the tribute gala clip resurfaced, juxtaposed with documents I'd released, screenshots, emails, video evidence, my voice narrating what had been erased. Former employees began sharing archive decks and meeting notes. My inbox flooded. I always wondered why they cut your name from the launch deck. I used to hear them rehearse your speeches. Without you. By noon, the hashtags were trending. Lynn Truth. Co-founder erased. Legacy restored. It didn't just shift, it ignited. But sitting alone that night, I didn't feel victorious. I felt still. I never wanted this. I just didn't want to be erased. The morning of the new tribute event, I stood by my window, watching seagulls drift above Asheville's skyline. The wind tugged at the edges of the world. An invitation had arrived days earlier, printed, embossed, and for the first time, addressed properly. Ember Lynn, co-founder. I didn't RSVP, I simply showed up. The Lintech atrium had been transformed. Orchids at every pillar, soft strings playing beneath nervous conversation. This wasn't a celebration. It was a rebranding. People nodded politely, some with guilt, others with relief. No one said what they should have years ago. A young woman with a headset led me to my seat. It wasn't on stage. It wasn't next to the board. It was 2 rows back. Close enough to see, far enough to be reminded the spotlight is optional. I was fine without it. But beside the podium sat a single empty chair, polished gold trim with a nameplate. Ember Lynn. I let a small smile lift one corner of my mouth. They thought it was forgiveness. It wasn't. It was clarity. The ceremony began. Shorter speeches, cautious words. The new CEO, a younger board member, spoke of renewal, accountability, and remembering who built the foundation. Then, a young intern took the stage, nervous, holding a folded paper. She couldn't have been older than 22. Her voice trembled. Before I joined Lintech, I studied the early pitch decks, the ones with handwritten margins, the one signed, not scanned, and I kept seeing the same name, E. Lynn. I didn't know her then. I do now. I'm here because a woman named Ember Lynn drafted a blueprint that people like me now get to build on. I felt my mother's hand brush mine. She leaned in and whispered, "You were never invisible. They just chose not to look." And I exhaled. After the applause, I didn't stand for a photo. I didn't wave or linger. I simply rose, met the eyes that finally saw me, and nodded once. That evening, I hosted a quiet dinner. Just a few people. Lyndon Marcellus, my first product mentor. We didn't talk about courtrooms or press releases. Just stories, laughter, fragments no one else had held on to. At one point, Marcellus handed me a small, weathered notebook. "Your mother kept this," he said. Called it her drawer journal. Said it was for things that mattered but didn't need to be filed. On the first page, in her slanted all-caps handwriting, "You were always the root. You never needed to bloom for them to feel your presence." That night, alone again, I stood by the glass doors, looking toward the darkening water. The wind had stilled. Some chairs aren't meant to be filled, some are meant to remind. Some stories end not with applause, but with truth reclaimed. If you've ever been pushed aside, rewritten, or told you were too quiet to count, then you understand why I chose truth over revenge. I didn't ask for applause, I asked to exist. So if this story moved you, let me know in the comments. Tell me your story. Remind someone they matter, and if you're still in the shadows, remember this. Dignity isn't silence. It's knowing when to speak and when to stand. Hit subscribe, not just to support me, but to amplify every voice they tried to erase. Your seat at this table, it's already waiting.